Let's catch up with some Spurs news and notes that you have missed, and let's get to our Spurs playoff player stock watch. Happy Friday. Welcome back to another episode of Spurs In Focus right here on YouTube, iTunes, Pocket Cast, Amazon Podcast. The list goes on and on. We appreciate you making Spurs In Focus your first and only spot for all things San Antonio Spurs. Thank you. We appreciate it. Keep those subscriptions going up. Speaking of subscriptions, Spurs In Focus Substack, completely free. Go sign up right now. Click subscribe and you are part of the crew. My name is Jeff Garcia, longtime Spurs writer in San Antonio. And I know everybody's still waiting for some Spurs playoff action. As of this recording, still don't know if there's going to be the Denver Nuggets or the Timberwolves. By now, we should know which direction that's going, whether it's extended or we already got an opponent. But either way, as we wait, we're going to cover some news that you may have missed, specifically the coaching staff and the front office. Get the vibe of practice of late. How have the players been feeling as they wait for the next opponent in the semifinals? And then Spurs playoff player stock watch. What players are going to keep an eye on in the next round, either if it's Denver or Minnesota. So we're going to cover our asses basically, all right? Because if it's Denver, we're going to put our players on our stock watch. If it's Minnesota, we're going to do the same thing. Quickly, heads up, apologies for no video today. Unfortunately, some scheduling got in the way for myself, not for our guests, but I just could not do a video today. But nevertheless, let's bring in our guest. It may not be Monday, but I'm glad he is here this week. Let's bring him on the stage. He is Matt Guzman with Spurs on Sports Illustrated. He is on X at Matt GZMEN. Matt, how you doing, buddy?
Doing well. Thanks for having me back. Obviously excited to get round 2 going. Was glad to see them get out of the first round without having to make a return trip to Portland. I know that was something they were thinking about for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Julian Champagne mentioned that like their goal was not to go back to Portland, because imagine that. I mean, I think that would have been disaster. Because it would have been a quick turnaround for the next round, the next series, had they advanced. So good thing they're getting some rest and relaxation and some practice time. Before we get into our Spurs news, you were at practice recently, Matt. What is the vibe? What are the players talking about? What did you see?
Yeah, well, I mean, everyone looks, as cliche as it sounds, everyone looks ready. I did ask Julian about, because obviously they're not going to say too much before knowing who they're facing about, I'd rather play this team or this team. But, I just asked them in general, like, do people want to play sooner? Do people want extra days of rest? Mm-hmm. How much of that kind of factors into what they're watching for, what they're rooting for internally. And Julian spoke for himself and said that, he's not much of a waiter. So he's ready to get going and he'd rather this second series or this first round series between Denver and Minnesota be done in 6 games. So they can go ahead and get going right away. Yeah. But everyone just looked to be in good spirits. Obviously, as a young team, you do your best to drown out all the noise and the talk. And I think they've done a great job of that, but you can't help but maybe feel a little vindicated knowing that some people had you, down and out just because you were a young team, So I think they definitely gained some confidence from performing well in round 1, and they're ready to get going.
Yeah, I think a lot of Spurs fans would agree with Julian. Let's get this show on the road. But who knows, Matt? Maybe by the time everyone's listening to this and watching this, we already know what direction that Denver-Minnesota series is going. Either it got extended or it's Minnesota. Because, are you a little surprised about that series? That Minnesota has Denver on the ropes as of this recording?
I was. Obviously Aaron Gordon missing a few of those games has been huge for Minnesota. He's such a pivotal and crucial piece of what Denver does on both sides of the ball. And so, that's been a big impact on that series. But I was honestly, and I'll give myself a little credit here because a lot of the Spurs fans had sky falling as soon as the Spurs lost that regular season finale.
I know that, yeah.
They were like, we have to play Denver. And I remember tweeting that night, like, I hope everyone realizes that there's a legitimate chance that Minnesota just takes care of them. Mm-hmm. And that's who the Spurs play anyway, which was the seemingly the option the Spurs fans were rooting for that night. And so, it was never going to be shocking that, Minnesota has Denver on the ropes. But still, when you see a team led by Jokic and they're down 3-1, it's a little puzzling. especially when that third win came without Edwards, and Dante DiVincenzo. So
Right.
I wasn't super surprised, but it's definitely been a good series, and I'm excited to figure out who comes out on top.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm hoping, as this release of this recording, that it's a game 7, because that'll be great for the Spurs. Whoever comes out of that, because whether it's Denver visiting San Antonio or Minnesota, hey, both of those teams have just gone through a gauntlet in the first round for them. So while the Spurs are resting pretty right now, but good. I'm glad to hear that, at least from your observation at practice, that the Spurs are in good spirits. They're shooting the ball, keeping warm, resting those injuries. Hopefully Mitch didn't really grind them too much, considering they're still waiting. But hey, before we get to the bigger news that people may have missed, because obviously the Spurs Blazer series, you went to Portland. How was that playoff atmosphere? And do you agree with, I believe, those Darren Fox, who said they felt the air go out of the Moda Center every time they would take the lead and just beat them?
Absolutely. I felt it, and I remember, a couple things. The Moda Center has a great energy, great fan base, but they need a new sound system dearly, because they cranked up that volume to 1,000, but it wasn't like, you feel the bass and it's nice. Yeah. It was more just like your ears were being ripped off a little bit.
Wow.
So they cranked that volume, and I would have liked it to be a little bit higher quality audio, I should say, for all the the chants and the intros and everything. But that place was rocking. You can tell Trailblazers faithful was excited to be in the postseason. Spurs had taken about 7 years, but I mean, it's been 5 for Portland. So that's that's not just 1 or 2 years off. They've been waiting a good while as well, and so they were excited about that. That arena was rocking, but I think Game 3 especially was the one that was pretty demoralizing. Not having Victor on the floor, you kind of feel like it's a lost opportunity if you're Portland, especially when you have a big lead. 15-point lead. One of your best players is when one of your best players starts barking at the other team, and then all of a sudden that team starts winning, and you blow your 15-point lead at home. I mean, that's got to be a rough watch for anyone who is in the building.
Yeah, I got to figure that the Blazers, that was the game they should have won if you're a Blazers fan, and because I really thought, Splitter, remember he had mentioned. He goes, oh, they go small, we're going to go big, and that's how we're going to beat them. And pretty much that's all he said. And actually the small ball won out in that scenario for San Antonio. But you know what? Good for the Spurs. They advance. And the Blazers are going to be back. You can tell they're an up-and-coming team. You can see it. They just got to get their coaching situation squared away.
I was going to say, I don't think it'd be a crazy take to say they have to keep Splitter if they want to keep building this momentum, but we'll see.
Did you see that report that apparently the Blazers staff or front office don't really take a shine to Splitter? I thought that was shocking. Yeah.
Yeah, I hadn't seen that one, but whatever happens behind the scenes over there doesn't surprise me anymore. I think it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, exactly. I think, remember Chauncey Billups investigation, gambling, all that good stuff going on. Not good times in Portland. Hey, I'm glad we're talking about the front office and all that stuff because, again, lost in the shuffle of the playoffs, this opening round series, and totally understandable. We haven't had a chance to talk about this here, Matt. Some Spurs news popped up, and the big one is a couple of Spurs are reportedly on the radar for 2 separate teams. Let's start off with Sean Sweeney, the assistant coach for the Spurs, first assistant coach behind Mitch Johnson. According to a report from Mark Stein, the Pelicans are looking to fill their head coaching vacancy and have made Sweeney among their candidates. I'll read the report from Stein here. It says the Stein line has learned that Pelicans have begun formal outreach to candidates they plan to pursue in addition to interim coach James Borrego. Sources say the names of strong interest from the league assistant ranks include San Antonio Sean Sweeney, Milwaukee's Darvin Ham, and Brooklyn's Steve Hetzel. First of all, I am not surprised at all that Sean Sweeney is on not just the Pelicans' radar, but could potentially be on other teams' radars looking for a new head coach. I mean, hell, Matt, it could be in Portland down the road. Who knows? Because remember, Splitter's interim head coach. He's not the full head coach there. So not too much of a big surprise. What's your take on this?
I mean, yeah, it's one of those things where, the curse of having great assistants, and this goes back to Popovich's days, when you have a great assistant coach, you're not going to have him too long because there's a reason he's a great assistant coach.
Yeah.
That was even the case at Austin last year when Scott King led them back to the playoffs for the first time. And they almost went and, they had a real case to win that G League title. And next thing you know, Austin has a new coach because Scott King is now on the bench under Mitch Johnson. And so, bringing in Sean Sweeney from Dallas was a huge get. I think everyone was rightfully excited when that news broke over the summer. And, all the players all season long have complimented the job that he's done and the just the way that the defense flows. And obviously the Spurs placing, hanging their hat on defense, that's been a huge asset for, that side of the ball. And so, naturally, if the Spurs are top 3 in defensive rating and one of the top defenses in the league behind Sean Sweeney as a former assistant coach turned another assistant coach, like he has to be on radars, and I think it'd be a well-deserved job for him in New Orleans or wherever it might be. But, that news doesn't surprise me at all. I think, he's just further proof, if you had a really good assistant, it's likely not going to be that way for long.
Yeah. Obviously it's a team effort, but with Sean Sweeney kind of guiding the defensive side of things for San Antonio, that's what he was known for in Dallas and pretty much his career in the NBA. Look at what the Spurs were defensively during the regular season, 3rd in defensive rating, according to the advanced metrics here, at 112, 3rd in defensive rating at 112. You look at offensive rebounding percentage, 26.2, block percentage, and it doesn't take much with Victor there, but nevertheless, 6.1% block percentage. Steal percentage was a little bit on the low side, 7.6, but nevertheless, again, the Spurs were one of the best defensive rated teams during the regular season. Now, you fast forward to the playoffs, sure, it's only was 5 games so far, but nevertheless, defensive rating in the playoffs, according to advanced metrics here, a 104.8, good for 2nd in the NBA postseason. And offensive rebounding percentage at 27% there. So, and maybe the steal percentage was shot up. They're 5th in the playoffs at 8.8%. So, yeah, obviously it takes a team effort, but Sean Sweeney is leading that. For me, I'm not going to be surprised if he's gone over the offseason. And I think the Spurs would want him to go. If some team offers him, obviously if it fits him and his desire. But if there's an opportunity, I think the Spurs would probably encourage him. They would not hold him back. Your thoughts?
Yeah, definitely not. I think, especially for a front office like the Spurs who love to, treat their players, treat their coaches, and, make sure that everyone's taken care of. They take care of their people. When one of your guys, as good as he's been for you, has a chance to go be a head coach, you let him do that. And I think the Spurs at that point, you trust that whoever Mitch Johnson works well with and whoever he's got his eye on, that, maybe it's somebody internally. These guys have been all around Sean this year. And obviously, even the summer league head coach last year, Mike Noyes, who's now on the assistant coach bench, started as a video guy, and he's worked his way up. And so, it could be somebody that's relatively unknown right now that the Spurs are kind of excited about and see prospects in. And, if Sean does take a job, you've got somebody internally maybe that's ready to take on that effort. And, when you have a coaching staff that will have been there for a couple of years and Victor's only getting older and the team's getting closer, I imagine that it becomes easier to adjust to losing a guy as good as Sean on the defensive front.
Yeah, again, no surprise, at least on my end, should he exit. And of course, if it's a good fit for him. Now, remember, before he joined the Spurs, he was with the Dallas Mavericks, and there was rumblings that he was targeted by the Knicks before ending up in San Antonio. He's considered one of the up-and-coming coaches in this league. The knack on the defensive side, and we just highlighted that with some numbers here. No one should be surprised if he leave the Spurs for an NBA head coaching position at all. So keep an eye on that as the offseason begins in a few months.
This is Optimus Prime. I urge you to subscribe to Spurs In Focus. The fate of the world is at stake.
In other Spurs news, more teams are looking to pluck from the Spurs. Matt Stein also reports that the Bulls are looking to add to their basketball operations. And Dave Tellup, he is the vice president of basketball operations. He had been the vice president of basketball operations for the Spurs, director of player personnel. director of scouting. The list goes on and on. He's been with the team for 13 years or 13 seasons. So they're looking to pluck from that. According to Stein's report here, it's not just the Spurs tell up, it's Cleveland's Gansey, Detroit's Dennis Lindsey, another former Spur there. The list goes on and on. So it looks like teams, man, they see the Spurs success and how quick it is. And I think that's what's enticing with Popovich and his coaching tree and all that he did. It took time before that happened. Now it's like NBA teams are seeing what Mitch and GM Brian Wright are doing, and they said, wow, they got to turn this team around quick. Remember, they were just 30-ish games last year to over 60 this year. So they want to pluck from that, Matt. Again, not surprising. What do you think about this report?
Yeah. And it wouldn't surprise me if just about anybody, like you're mentioning, anybody on the Spurs coaching staff and front office and players are being watched. Guys, people are going to make calls to the Spurs in the summer for players that they want, whether it's Victor, because you have to shoot your shot, or De'Aaron Fox, or you never know. But I imagine that those conversations will be had, and there will be some shakeup as it goes every season, So just like the Sweeney report, doesn't surprise me if a guy that's had such a big hand in developing, Victor and the core around him that's really honestly been pretty together since Victor arrived. Obviously some pieces have left and gone, but Devin, Keldon, Victor, they've all been there for 3 years now, and I think that's no surprise that teams would want, especially a team like Chicago, who's been middling for so long, want to kind of take a step forward in that department.
Yeah, you can see they restarted their rebuild when they traded Kobe White, and they're going to get some good draft picks in this offseason. So they're sitting pretty. So it looks like they're seeing their opportunity to rebuild. So why not dip into the Spurs brain trust with Dave Tulloch to move forward? So I totally understand that. But look, I get a reflection on the Spurs, just how quickly a team can just rise from the ashes as the Spurs have, and now are a legit contender, not just for a deep postseason run, but to win it all this season. But Matt, can you imagine that phone call? Imagine Brian Wright getting a call from the Bulls saying, okay, what do you want from Victor? He has to just start laughing, right? Just starts laughing. There's no way. I cannot conceptualize a trade package that would move the needle for Brian Wright. I mean, it would have to be something. The way I could think of is Cooper Flag, maybe, and like insane amount of draft picks. Like just like so many teams that would be involved. But or be Pat Riley, Matt, and say, hey, here's Bam Adebayo. How about that, Matt? Yeah, not gonna work.
Well, that's pretty funny because
I'm
pretty sure he said Wembayaya.
I can't pronounce it.
He didn't even say it the right way. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. We're in. I can see Brian Wright goes, I don't know who Wembayama is, but I know who Wembayama is. So I got the wrong number there, Pat. You got the wrong number. We're joined by Matt Guzman with Spurs on Sports Illustrated. He is on X at MattGZMAN. Just a quick head notes. One, apologies for no video show today due to some schedule conflicts on my end. I just could not make it. And also, we are recording this before yesterday night's Denver-Minnesota game. So we really don't know what the status of that series is. But nevertheless, we will talk about it at a future episode of Spurs in Focus. But Matt, it's been a while since we've done this. We haven't done a player stock watch, but we're going to do a different lap. We're going to do a Spurs playoff player stock watch coming up right here on Spurs in Focus. Matt, I upped my game with the graphic. What do you think about that?
That was nice. We're getting fancy over here.
Baby steps, I know. All right. Matt's a veteran at this, but for y'all who don't know what this segment is going to be about, is basically we're looking at players that you want to buy stock in or maybe not buy stock in. And again, because we're recording this before the Denver-Minnesota game 6, I believe, last night, we're going to cover our butts, all right? So we're going to look at both sides of the coin here. So it could be Matt can pick a player that he says, oh, I'm going to make this up. Julian Champagne, he's going to go ballistic versus Denver. Or he can say, you know what? Yeah, Harper might have issues against Ant Edwards in Minnesota. I would not buy stock in him. So that's the gist. That's the idea. Let's start off with Minnesota because as of this recording, they're in control of the series. So we'll just, for just intents of purposes, we'll just go Minnesota advancing. Who are you buying stock in or not buying stock in from the Spurs roster should the Spurs face the Minnesota Timberwolves coming up next in the semis?
I think I would have to go Victor for Minnesota. Not saying that, Minnesota is an easier opponent. I think they're both equally challenging, but in different ways. And I just, I think I like Victor's odds at having a really, really strong showing in series against Rudy Gobert better than I do against Jokic.
Yeah, I'm with.
And that's kind of where I'm at. I think I would buy stock in him, and obviously just watching him and Anthony Edwards play, obviously we don't know the extent of his injury, but that would be exciting on its own. And I think Victor would be pretty willing and ready to rise for that moment.
You know what? I'm with you. I would love to see Victor against like Rudy Gobert because at least in the series versus Denver, he's been playing pretty good basketball for his standards. It's the French connection there. I think that'll be enticing to see. But you look at what Victor has done in the last 5 games versus the Timberwolves, 27.8 points per game, 8.4 rebounds, 2.8 assists, again in the last 5 games versus Minnesota. So he definitely loves playing against that blue jersey across the way on the court there. Also, too, you remember earlier season, I had spoken to Ant Edwards, and then I spoke to Wemby, and I said, hey, Wemby, Ant said he wants to try to dunk on you. And so Wemby did the whole thing. Oh, okay, fine. Yeah, if he wants to, good. And he might get me, but I'm going to block him back. I would love to see Ant try that. I would love to see that happen. Just to see if he comes back from injury, has the stones to try to go up against Mount Wembayama in the paint. No, that's definitely a good stock to buy in right now should the Spurs and Minnesota meet in the opening round. Another player that I'm buying stock in, and it should the Minnesota Timberwolves be next, is that guy you see on your screen, De'Aaron Fox. He's been having a great last few games to close out the Blazers. I want to see how he goes about. And again, if Ant does play, bigger guards that they have on the Minnesota roster. These are experienced players on that end of the court. I'm pretty sure they know what he did versus Portland. I'd love to see how that handles. But I got a feeling he's still going to cook in the semis. What do you think about Fox?
For sure. He's proven through one series that, I'm not going to say that he hurt everyone because I don't think he gets into that kind of thing. But he proved a lot of people wrong. A lot of people were upset at what they were seeing from his Fox scores. And, this is not the player that we needed next to Victor. And obviously they're incorrect because they are online on Twitter on the couch. And not playing in the NBA, but I mean, yeah, he just what he was able to do, especially the last couple of games in Portland to close out the series. He's proving that this is his moment. This is where he thrives. And obviously, he was a clutch player of the year for a reason a couple of years back, and he's been just a huge asset to them. And I don't see any reason that won't continue against Minnesota.
Yeah, look at his numbers in the last 5 games versus Minnesota: 22 points per game, 6.2 assists, 4.6 rebounds. Again, the last 5 games versus the Puppies, the Timberwolves. So, yeah, those are 2 good players to buy stock in. But, Matt, let's switch the switch here and say, okay, well, what if Denver somehow comes out of this series and they win last night and they force a Game 7? Who are you buying stock in or would not buy stock in should the Spurs meet the Nuggets?
I'm going to go ahead and take stock in Steph Castle.
Okay.
I don't know, again, what Aaron Gordon's situation will be, but especially if he's out and the ball is, a little bit more focused in on Jokic and Murray. I think we're going to see a lot of Castle taking on Jamal Murray. And I think that's going to be a chance for him to, like he did with Denny Avdia, like he did with Scoot Henderson, really be physical, and obviously they always talk about the added physicality in playoff game. And so, Steph is going to have that chance to really exert himself and try to disrupt the rhythm of some of their best scorers, because if he can give them a tough night, just somebody on the Spurs needs to get hot and all of a sudden you've got a pretty good game. And so I think that's what I'm taking. I like the way he was handling himself in Portland, and obviously not afraid of the moment, even going at it with Danny Avdija a little bit. But I think he's ready, and I would bet on him to have a good series.
Yeah, that's a good pick because Denver, they definitely have big guards. They got big boys at that guard position. You got Hardaway, Jamal Murray. I don't know. Christian Brown is a big dude, but again, he's still a crafty player. He could start getting hot from the perimeter and, of course, attacking the rim. Interesting, though, Castle in his last 5 games versus Denver, 17 points per game, 8.6 rebounds, 8 assists. So pretty good stat line, but I'm pretty sure that has a lot to do with just how, big that backcourt for the Denver Nuggets are. However, if you look back on April of 2025, in 33 minutes, Steph Castle, a double-double, 15 points, 15 rebounds. You go this year on March 2026, 30 points and 11 rebound outing. So he's kind of kicked it in to high gear versus the Nuggets there. He scored 30, 20 in the second meeting, and then 10 in he had a double-double in the final meeting versus Denver. So he does play pretty well. That's a great pick. For me, I'm going to buy stock in this guy, Dylan Harper. I'll be interested. I would love to just if I could just passively reserve my stock though, because I think this will be a true test for him. Again, going up against the big lineup that Denver could present to San Antonio. As mentioned, it's Hardaway, it's Jamal Murray. I'm pretty sure, as the rookie and those guys being veterans, they're going to try to go at him. I think he'll step up to the challenge. But you look at just what Harper's been doing, not just the regular season, but in the postseason. He's been kind of a catalyst for the Spurs in wins. We saw that happen during the series versus Denver. Now you look at the last 4 games for Harper, 11.3 points per game, 3.0 assists, and 2.8 rebounds in 4 games versus the Nuggets last season. Technically, it's last season already. Yeah, last regular season. So I'm interested to see how he goes up against battle-tested bigger guards and how they will defend him. What do you think about that?
Yep, I just think that that's part of the job, and things are going to fluctuate. Matchups are going to look different as you go, but when you're facing a Denver team that has proven to be really physical and really big and powerful, you're going to need somebody to match that energy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's going to be definitely, if that is the series, if it is a Spurs Nuggets second round series, I think that's going to be one of the bigger keys, is going to be matching physicality and not getting bullied, getting rebounds and getting to the rim on offense and preventing it on the other side on defense. And so I think you're right.
Yeah. I think those would be interesting players to buy stock in. I was trying to think of trying just to be different, say, who would I not buy stock in? And I couldn't think of a player because Wemby is obvious going up against Joker. I think he still puts up good numbers, maybe, but it's still Wemby in the postseason. So, he's not going to be a problem there. I was close to saying Harper not stock because of playing it up against experienced guards that Denver has. But the same thing could be said for Minnesota. If they play Minnesota, should Ant Edwards get back, it's him. They just got some quality guards on that roster, and they're big guys too. Maybe Harrison Barnes is somebody maybe don't want to buy too much stock in. He's been quiet for his standards during the postseason. But no. But this goes back to our point that we've been saying all season long, Matt. This team is just loaded. They're stocked. I mean, I can see Devin Vassell going off against either team. I can see, as you mentioned, Steph Castle, just having himself a game or games in the series versus a Minnesota or a Denver, as you highlighted. So yeah, it could be very interesting and how this would shake up. But Matt, I gotta ask you, who do you want as of this recording? Make it very clear, everybody. As of this recording, who would you rather see, Minnesota or Denver, for the silver and black?
Minnesota. All day. I like that matchup. I think the intrigue around a potential Edwards return and watching him and Victor go at it is always fun. Mm-hmm. I think that's a series that the Spurs could feasibly come out and win. And I'm not saying they couldn't against Denver, but that either one of these teams, I guess I'll just say that either one of these teams are going to be very difficult to beat, especially given the fact that they have been here before and you have not. Mm-hmm. And so, if you're the Spurs, you're not trying to pick your opponent. You're just going to take who comes at you and figure out, whether it works out or not. This is the kind of team that you're going to have to beat if you want to be a contender. And so, I think both would be great matchups, but I think I'd rather see Minnesota and get a chance to, handle a team that may be a little disadvantaged on the injury front, that things like that happen. Obviously, the Spurs were without Victor a game last series. And so,
absolutely.
I think that just gives you a chance to go out and win. And I think that's something the Spurs could handle. And I think between those two teams, that's who I'd rather face.
Yeah, I'm with you. Look, it takes a little luck to win titles. And look, if you want to take a hobbled Minnesota team, totally understand. No Dante DiVincenzo. As of this recording, Ant is still up in the air. How long he's going to be out, et cetera, et cetera. If you advance, will it be game 2 he returns, game 3? We just don't know. So you rather take your chances with that. And Denver, as much as they've been kind of struggling to close out the season, and even in this series versus Minnesota, let's not forget, Matt, Denver was that rare team that gave the Spurs the L's after the All-Star break. Didn't they give them like several? I was like the team that kind of got their number. Despite, having a perfect February and, crazy, winning streaks. It was Denver that gave the Spurs the most fits, but we shall see. He is Matt Guzman with Spurs on Sports Illustrated. Follow him on X at MattGZMAN, but we got to hear from you. What do you think about the news about Sean Sweeney, Dave Tellep being on the radar of other teams, and they want to pluck from the Spurs Brain Trust? And where do you stand with your Spurs playoff player stock watch? Who are you buying stock in if it's Minnesota? Who are you buying stock in if it's Denver? Let me know on X at Jeff G Spurs. I'll let Matt know on X at MattGZMAN. I know you're very, very busy over there at Spurs on Sports Illustrated. Can you tease the viewers, the listeners right now, what you got cooking?
Yeah, well, just full second round coverage. I'm working on a story about actually on Jacob Chance, the Austin Spurs coach who has rejoined the Spurs coaching staff for the playoffs. He's been in and around practices, and so I'm gonna continue working on that story and kind of tell that story and figure out what his impact has been and why that matters so much for the Spurs to have that kind of the connection between those two.
Absolutely. Again, you want to catch that article, you want to go to Spurs on Sports Illustrated. Anything else, Matt, you got for us? That's it. See, Matt is simple. Keeps it very easy for you guys. Go check out that story about Jacob Chance once he releases it. The best way to find it is on his X at MattGZMAN. Go do there now. Matt, thank you for taking time out of your busy day to join us here on Spurs In Focus. We appreciate it. And definitely appreciate you stopping by. Everybody else right here on Spurs On Focus. You can subscribe on YouTube, iTunes, Pocket Cast, Amazon Podcasts, YouTube Music. The list goes on and on. Spurs In Focus Substack, completely free. Just go there, hit subscribe, you're in. Doesn't cost you a penny. We will be back likely on Monday, barring any big news, probably during the weekend if we get all sorted out about the Minnesota Denver, who's next. But until then, just still waiting on the holding pattern. And let us know what you think ASAP. So for Mr. Matt Guzman, I am Jeff Garcia, and now you're in focus with Spurs In Focus.